There we are. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again this week for Plan First Live. And this week, we're going to be discussing smart floor plans and how to avoid wasted space. My guest today, again, is Nick Lico. Before we jump into introductions, just quickly, thank you again for joining us. If you guys want to comment during the session, you're welcome to add comments or questions, and we'll do our very best to answer them. If we do run out of time and we don't get to everyone's question, feel free to send us an email or get hold of us via Facebook or our website, and then we can just communicate with you privately. Plan First, as you may or may not know, is a company that specializes in architectural, interior, and landscape design, as well as quantity surveying and engineering. My background, very briefly, I'm an architect registered in South Africa, but currently living in New Zealand and working towards my registration here in New Zealand. I have many, many years of experience in the architectural field, and I'm joined today by my colleague and fellow architect, Nick Lico. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, hello, Sean. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Nick Lico. I operate a number of companies in the construction and design industry. One of them is my architecture firm that's predominantly specializes in renovations. We do new houses on occasion as well. And we also have associated building companies to build those projects for our clients.
All right, let's jump into it. So today's topic, as I said, was smart floor plans. And we're going to touch briefly on it because it's quite a broad topic. There are many ways to avoid wasted space, but we'll just go through a few of them. And again, feel free to add comments as we go. Now, the question is, what are smart floor plans? And generally, it's all about wasting space, not wasting space, but it's a balance between aesthetic and not wasting space. So you don't want to cut out every single square meter to save costs. You would go through a systematic process and just being mindful that every square meter does cost money and not wasting square meters on spaces that you don't generally use often. So if we have a look at the principles, I always say to my clients, look at how you live, not what you want. So be realistic about your lifestyle. Don't worry about the aesthetic in the beginning. Start with what your needs are, and the aesthetic will follow later. You would also look at zoning. So one would zone private spaces, public spaces, and service spaces together. And just be mindful of your circulation space. Try and keep it between 8 and 10% of the total. Otherwise, it does become a bit of a waste. Then I would also say try and utilize multifunctional rooms. So things like one of the biggest culprits of wasted space is the formal dining room, for instance. Used very seldom, but utilizing a whole room. So we'll start with long passages, and this is, I think, it's less so in today's open plan living, but traditionally there were always long passages in the middle of homes, typically with bedrooms on one side, living spaces on the other, or bedrooms in the front and living spaces at the back. But it's very unnecessary wasted space. So ways around it would be to either, as I said, utilize open plan living, or just group the rooms around a central hub. So each of the rooms can still have their own dedicated space and be a decent size, but you minimize having that corridor running through the whole length of the house, basically. Another one is oversized foyers. Now, although it does give quite an impressive entrance to the house, try and incorporate the foyers into usable space, and I'll show you in the next image. You know, especially if you've got a smaller home, a foyer is unnecessary. If you look at the next image, there you've still got a very nice entrance, but it's more incorporated into the living rooms around it. So you would make a statement out of that entrance so that it doesn't lose its importance. And you can do this with a nice light fixture or with a different floor material, for instance, so that it does still have speak its own language, but it doesn't waste that whole enclosed foyer space. And now we're going to have a look at the formal dining room, which, as I said before, is one of the biggest culprits of wasted space. And how you can avoid this is, if one has a look at putting sliding screens, for instance, between an open plan living room, dining room. You're not using it, you open it, and when you want a bit of privacy or you want a more formal setting, you can just close those screens. They could be made of anything, and you could effectively split that space into two. So then you can do away entirely with having a formal dining room. Another one is awkward corners and dead zones, typically underneath a staircase. They are difficult to furnish, and they're also quite difficult to light. But with a bit of clever planning, you could put storage in, you could put a workspace in, and that becomes a totally functional space that actually almost gives you another room to work with. Clever lighting can also, you can make quite a nice feature underneath the staircase. You can, there's a whole number of things that you can do with it. But try and utilize every square meter that you have got. I mean, that space under the stairs is square meters that you have got, and it can be utilized in a very clever way. Bathrooms is another one. Very often they take up so much space unnecessarily. And although you do get houses where this would actually, yeah, it would suit the style of the house, but really, realistically, you can still do a very nice, luxurious bathroom. Just make sure that you've got enough space between your sanitary ware and fittings, and nice, comfortable space. You don't spend a lot of time in the bathroom per se compared to the rest of your day, so try not have too oversized a bathroom. So the takeaway tips really start with how you live, not necessarily what you think you need. Question every how do I say this? Every inch of hallway, really. And think to yourself, is it really necessary? Where does this passage or hallway go to? And is there another way of designing it to minimize the length or the width of it? Rather take the time to invest in smart design rather than investing in square meters. And then also have a look at the volume of the room. So it's not all about the floor area, but it is about the height and the volume, the light, your window area, etc., as well. Having big windows, of course, does make a room or a space look bigger automatically too. So Nick, I think I'm going to hand over to you now to have a bit of a chat with your presentation. I'm just going to remove this one and put yours on. So just tell me what you want me to click through.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Great to be back. And I'll take a slightly different approach to wasted space. I was just writing down a equation that I made up in terms of how I believe consumers look at floor areas of new houses in particular in the current day and age. And that is an equation where effectively it's not unusual for a customer to look at a square meter rate, and the lower they can get that rate and then multiply it by the floor area, the best result they will get. And so what I'm saying there is there's a lot of strategies that are taken to new suburban developments where strategies are brought on board to maximize the floor areas in the most economic manner. And I'll just give a couple of examples of that. I was just trying to work out what a double garage is, and it's around about 50 square meters in floor area. That's often where you'll find the laundry in these new houses. And then the living spaces as well are generally very oversized comparative to older homes. And so it's almost as if floor area is almost the equivalent in car terminologies of a V8. And so somebody actually referring to their home and saying it's a 500 square meter home has a sense of grandeur. The reason why I'm talking about that is there's an incongruent relationship between good planning, as Sean has shown, and effectively grandeur. That we don't believe that extra or oversized rooms generally produce necessarily a better result. It's interesting how that's changed over time. We live in a 1930s house, and if I described it in terms of the rooms, and then I'll mention the square meterage of it, most people would be quite surprised how small it is. So we have a 5-bedroom, 2 living room, 2 bathroom, double garage home, and it is 170 square meters. By modern suburban developments, 170 square meter home, it wouldn't be unusual that at most that would probably be a single living 2-bedroom home. So it shows you how much things have changed. The kinds of things that have changed are, I'll start just with furniture, and that's why I wanted to show this house as an example. This is a brand new beach house that we designed. And one of the ways we managed the customer's budget is that in the preliminary design, we ultimately started to realize the house was too big. And that was one of the main ways we could bring the project back into budget. This is a home where the owner had quite a Scandinavian influence. And the reason I'm mentioning that is if you look at the furniture, you'll see that the arms on the furniture are very spindly. A lot of modern furniture has very wide apertures to the couches in particular, and that I believe is a response, as I mentioned, to that new suburban houses tend to have oversized rooms. It doesn't cost a lot more to build those rooms bigger, so that it tends to give an impression that the house has more value just because it is effectively larger. And I think the furniture manufacturers have responded to that in that manner. If we look at the next slide, this is a very old-fashioned home. We actually really like doing these projects in the office, and it does tend to be for people who effectively try to put it in a nice manner, possibly of an older generation. What I really like about this photo is you notice there's no TV. First of all, there's a fireplace, and the kinds of words people would use. It's cozy, it's intimate. You can see there's even a musical instrument. There's some personal artifacts. It's a very personalized and meaningful space for the homeowner in terms of how they engage with their family and with their guests. So there's a much stronger relationship between the furniture. And if we look at the next slide, it's the same thing again. I mean, here's an old character bay window. The dining table is, in my view, it all looks very old-fashioned, but what I'd like you to contemplate from the image is how successfully these spaces create space and don't waste space. That effectively, they were well thought through in terms of what their primary purpose was, and then they had a functionality that was relevant to them. We don't just do old homes. The next slide you'll see is much more what we're accustomed to. Big kitchen islands. You can see in this picture then there's a dining table and a couple of chairs. A lot more informality and a lot more space that then basically has an outlook. The next project, just to have a look at, is one that I worked on overseas. A little unusual in that it was a conversion of a building. The turrets we see there, it was actually a cancer hospital originally built in the late 19th century. So those round turrets, we actually had to convert those into usable apartment space. They're about 10 meters approximately in diameter. And if we look at the next slide, the next slide following this one.
That is the last one, it seems, Nick.
Sorry. Okay, no problem. There was a slide which basically shows how we populated the living spaces. So I think just to conclude, as architects, when we design spaces, I think one of the biggest differentials, and this is one of the ways we actually bring huge value to projects, is if you're going to customize a house, effectively the price per square meter will be more expensive than if you're basically doing repetitive group home builds. But what we really bring to the table is actually that we very sensitively critique the required floor area for the customer. And in that example, that first example I showed with the new beach house, we reduced the floor area during the concept design, I think by almost 60%. That's how much we brought it down. So it was a lot of money that effectively that design process allowed us to do for that homeowner. I think we'll just leave it there. I think it'd be interesting to get some questions.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying, Nick. And I think that there's a lot more emphasis nowadays on finding smart solutions, having furniture that can double up, that can pack away. You only utilize it when you actually need it. And it's all just an effort to save space and to minimize your footprint. Because ultimately you can only be in one room at any given point in time. So do you really need an array of 6 or 7 rooms? And I think that's really where it's heading to. A couple of questions. Let's have a look at the first one. Let me have a look here. How do you know if a hallway is too long or inefficient? Nick, would you like to comment on that?
Question. That's a good question. I mean, a good designer will ultimately be able to basically minimize that in a house design. I mean, with older houses, things like entrances and hallways actually become part of the grandeur. But even the modern spec homes are really successful at minimizing those. I mean, one of the ways you do it is by you see this in American homes, where they're actually they're really ruthless on this. That you open the front door or the back door, and you're effectively straight into the house. So you see it on American shows where you open the front door and bang, you're actually pretty much in the living space straight away. So you just eliminate the hallway.
Nothing's
altogether.
Yeah.
The hallway is, as we spoke about last week, is a planning tool, which is in many ways Victorian. That when you from the front of the house, you went one way to a master bedroom, the other way to the public parlour, and the hall there to lead you to the additional bedrooms and then to the back of the house. But in modern planning, you don't need a hallway.
No. All right, let's move on to Nashani's question. She says, how can lighting improve flow and reduce wasted space? I would say lighting can sort of create a pathway where you want to direct people. So even if you've got a space like under the stairs, you can use lighting to make a feature of that. Let's say you're not going to be putting a workspace or a storage space there. You can actually use it for artwork and just have really nice lighting to accentuate the artwork. And then that becomes a focal point in the house all on its own.
True.
Scott says, is open plan layout always better?
No.
I would say no, it's not. I think I love open plan, but not everywhere. I do think there still needs to be some space for quiet. Even if it's not a dedicated room, you can easily use furniture to demarcate certain areas. Nick, what would you say?
No, definitely not. It's it's very interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people who listen in are well traveled. It's a much bigger topic. I think it's really important for people if they're going to basically, we see it in renovations because of restrictions in houses. Really important that people keep a broad mind and work with a designer who will actually create a dialogue on configurations of spaces. For some people, the idea of having a separate dining room is not an obsolete factor, and that's why I think I even included a couple of slides in the presentation that look, on an aesthetic basis, they look very old-fashioned, but they're actually very reflective of the lifestyle that household has. If we had time, I'd show you more of that particular house. At the other end, they complement it with a much more, a larger open plan. Do you mind, is it okay if there's a question here, if you don't mind, Sean, which is, what are some creative ways to turn awkward corners into usable space? And what I just wanted to just mention on that is I learned this from an architect here in Wellington, who was pretty much my main mentor in learning about domestic space after having been a commercial architect. And that was one of the partners at Craig Moller, that is a very historic housing architect in New Zealand. I'll just deviate just very quickly for a second. I remember when I drew a floor plan for a new house, and they looked at the plan and they said that the house is 200 millimeters too big. That, I thought they were just trying at that stage to create work for me. They were right. That's the skill that a good architect will bring to space definition. That's quite incredible if you think about it, that over 20, 30 meters, you could look at a plan and go, you think it needs to basically reduce it to that by that much. Back to the question about the corners, that one of those slides I had that showed the violin in the corner and the fireplace and even a center table, we're adamant in the practice that you cannot design a house or the spaces inside that house without actually laying out the furniture. The furniture is actually what you utilize with the customer to determine how their lifestyle is going to operate. It's interesting. Our 15-year-old daughter, I just absolutely love watching kids play Roblox. I think it's an absolutely fantastic game, and I found it intriguing how that's exactly how they think, by basically laying furniture. It's almost like a modern form of playing doll houses. That, a doll house is it doesn't have the allure unless you start populating it.
Yes,
it's a real human method.
I just want to go back to a comment that we had earlier. If you're talking about renovations, it's very difficult to take an existing house which was compartmentalized, renovate it and make it completely open plan, because some of those structural elements will need to be retained. So although you can make it open plan to an extent, you will automatically have those demarcations just by the nature of the structure. So those are very good opportunities to do that demarcation in the various zones in an open plan.
Yeah, open plan can definitely backfire.
Yes.
And I see many cases where people think it's just a simple equation of, let's just put some really big oversized doors, and basically that's going to create a meaningful indoor-outdoor flow. But all it creates is a different condition of that comment before about how do you avoid hallways. It can equally just create a very undefined living experience. I had an experience many years back, and sometime I might have even mentioned on this show, I had a phone call where a parent was so irate they had renovated and created open plan, and then when baby came along and they were watching sport one night, mum and baby had to basically go and huddle in the bedroom because there wasn't any defined spaces other than the open plan. An open plan had been converted to the space to watch football.
Yeah, that's why I quite enjoy the life cycle of a house, especially if you've got one family living in it for a number of years, to see how the metamorphosis of the house over that time is quite interesting.
Absolutely. And it's the same with commercial conversions. They're just fantastic projects to work on. Things like any type of old office buildings that get converted into modern apartments. You end up with characteristics and scale and challenges that you won't have if you're building from new. And so it can go really well, and it can equally go really bad.
Well, I think as long as every design decision has got intent, and there's a reason why you're making that decision, and you're not just making it because you're going to do something.
No, that's right.
Let's have a look at one last question for today. What is the best way to make a small entryway both functional and stylish? Functional, I would say add coat hooks or some kind of storage, built-in seat maybe, and stylish, Probably with lighting is a good one. Nick, your thoughts?
Nice thing about small spaces is they're more affordable to make much more luxurious. I'll give
Yes.
I'll just give you an example, like a bathroom. A bathroom historically, based on pragmatic requirements, would have been designed to a 6 foot wide bath, and so that's 1.8 meters wide. So even a new bathroom, you can effectively fit what you need, which is a shower, a toilet, and a vanity and a door, in a 2 by 2 meter space. So that's 4 square meters. Interestingly enough, you make that room 1 by 1 meter bigger in each direction and make it 3 meters by 3 meters. That's 9 square meters. All of a sudden, you've actually got over twice as much floor area, which means you've actually got over twice as much construction cost.
So you could have actually had 2 bathrooms.
Correct. That's exactly right. You're right. You could actually have 2 bathrooms.
Yeah.
And so a small entrance. That's what we like about considered space. Like that beach house that I started with, because it was architect designed and we're conscientious about the size of the house, it means that the quality of the house is of a much higher quality than what you will get on average in a just a new suburban subdivision build.
All right, I think that has brought us to the end of our time. I just would like to add that next week's topic, we're going to speak about, is it better to rebuild or to renovate? And Nick will be my guest again next week. So that's quite an interesting and controversial, I think, topic. But there are definitely some key considerations to think about before you make that decision. And lastly, if you guys want to get hold of us, you can reach us on our website, our 0800 number, Facebook page, or Instagram. Nick, thanks so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
And we'll see everyone again next week. Thank you.